The community theater on Maple Street had been a fixture in the small Pennsylvania town of Millbrook for 37 years. Originally a Methodist church, the building had been converted in the 1980s into a performance space where local residents could explore their passion for theater without the pressure or pretension of professional productions. Or, at least, that's what it used to be. Marcus Webb had been directing at Millbrook Community Theater for 5 years, and in that time he'd developed a reputation. To some, he was a dedicated artist bringing professional standards to amateur theater. To others, he was an arrogant tyrant who'd forgotten that community theater was supposed to be about community, not his ego. At 42, Marcus had studied theater at a mid-tier conservatory, worked briefly in regional theater, and never quite made it to the level of success he'd envisioned for himself. Broadway had remained a distant dream. Professional theater had proven brutally competitive. So he'd landed in Millbrook, where he could be the biggest fish in a very small pond. He ran auditions like professional cattle calls. He dismissed actors who didn't meet his standards. He made casting decisions based on his vision rather than giving opportunities to passionate community members. And he talked, constantly, about his professional experience and how lucky Millbrook was to have someone of his caliber. Today's auditions were for the spring production of Death of a Salesman. Marcus had his vision: edgy, contemporary, darker than traditional interpretations. He wanted young actors who could bring intensity. He definitely didn't want what community theater usually offered: retirees looking for a hobby. The auditions had been running for 3 hours. Marcus sat in the middle of the small theater, his assistant director beside him, a stack of headshots on the table in front of him. He'd seen 20 actors so far. Most had been dismissed within 30 seconds of starting their audition monologues. "Next," Marcus called out, not bothering to look up from his notes. An older man walked onto the stage. He looked to be in his late 60s or early 70s with silver hair, weathered features, and the kind of presence that suggested he'd lived a full life. He wore simple clothes: khakis, a button-down shirt, comfortable shoes, nothing theatrical or attention-seeking. Marcus glanced up, already forming his assessment. Too old, too ordinary, wrong energy. "Name?" Marcus asked, his tone already dismissive. William Hayes." "And what are you auditioning for, William?" "Willie Loman." Marcus almost laughed. Willie Loman was the lead role, a traveling salesman facing the collapse of his dreams, his family, his sense of identity. It was the most demanding role in the play, requiring an actor who could carry the emotional weight of the entire production. "Willie Loman," Marcus repeated. "You understand this is a very demanding role. It requires someone who can handle the psychological complexity, the emotional range." "I've played the role before," William said quietly. "In community theater, I'm sure." "Look, William, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'm looking for something specific for this production. Someone younger, more dynamic. Willie Loman, as traditionally played, is a bit dated. Arthur Miller wrote him as a 63-year-old man facing the end of his career. That's not dated, that's the character." Marcus bristled at being corrected. "I'm aware of what Miller wrote. I'm also aware that modern interpretations can bring fresh perspectives. I'm envisioning Willie as someone in his 40s, still young enough to believe he can turn things around. That fundamentally changes the tragedy. Willie's age is essential to why he can't accept his failures. He's out of time." "Are you directing this play, or am I?" Marcus's voice had an edge now. "You are." "I'm just offering perspective based on experience. Experience in community theater isn't really relevant to what I'm trying to accomplish here." William was quiet for a moment. "Would you like to hear my audition?" Marcus sighed. "Fine. Go ahead. But keep it brief." William took a moment, centering himself. Then he began the monologue. Willie's speech about being well-liked, about personality mattering more than knowledge, about the tragedy of believing in the wrong dreams. Within seconds, the energy in the room changed. William didn't perform the monologue, he inhabited it. Every word carried the weight of a life spent chasing illusions. His voice cracked in the right places. His body language showed a man trying to maintain dignity while everything crumbled around him. It was raw, honest, devastating. Marcus's assistant director leaned forward, captivated. Several actors waiting to audition stopped their whispered conversations to watch. William finished, the silence in the theater profound. Then Marcus spoke. "That was very emotional, but it's not what I'm looking for. You're playing it too traditionally. Too much pathos. I need something grittier, younger, more aggressive." Willie Loman isn't aggressive. He's desperate. There's a difference. Again, I'm the director. I know what I need, and what I need is someone who can take direction, not someone who thinks their community theater experience makes them an expert on Arthur Miller. William studied Marcus for a long moment. "You didn't like my audition. It was fine for what it was, but it's not right for my vision of this production. Your vision fundamentally misunderstands the play." The room went very quiet. No one talked to Marcus Webb like that. Not in his theater. "Excuse me?" Marcus stood up, his voice rising. "You walk into my audition, for my production, and tell me I don't understand the play? I'm saying that Willie Loman's age is essential to the tragedy." Making him younger to be edgy misses the entire point of why his story matters. "I've studied this play extensively. I have a degree in theater. I've directed professionally. And you—" Marcus gestured dismissively. "You're some retired guy who did community theater and thinks that makes you qualified to critique my artistic choices. I'm offering feedback from someone who knows the role. From community theater. Do you have any idea how insulting it is to have an amateur try to school me on professional theater?" William's expression didn't change. "I'm not trying to insult you. I'm trying to help you understand that some choices fundamentally alter what makes a play work." "Get out!" Marcus shouted. "I don't need some delusional old man who played Willie in a church basement telling me how to direct. You're not right for this production. You're not right for any production I'd direct. You're exactly what's wrong with community theater. People with no real talent who think participation trophies make them actors." The cruelty of the words hung in the air. Several people in the theater gasped. William's assistant director looked horrified. William remained calm, though something flickered in his eyes, not anger, but disappointment. "I understand. Thank you for your time." He walked off the stage with quiet dignity, leaving through the theater's side exit. Marcus turned to the remaining actors. "Let that be a lesson. Community theater might tolerate mediocrity, but I don't. If you're not prepared to meet professional standards, you're wasting my time. Next." But the energy in the auditions had shifted. Several actors looked uncomfortable. Others whispered to each other. Marcus's assistant director pulled him aside. "Marcus, that was harsh. He was actually quite good. He was adequate. And he needed to understand that I'm in charge here. I can't have actors questioning my artistic vision. He's William Hayes. He seemed familiar to me. I think he might have— I don't care who he is in the local community theater scene. He's not right for my production." The auditions continued, but word of Marcus's outburst spread quickly. Millbrook was a small town. By evening, dozens of people knew that Marcus Webb had humiliated an older actor, called him talentless, and kicked him out of auditions. What they didn't know yet, what Marcus didn't know, was exactly who William Hayes actually was. The next morning, Marcus received a phone call from Janet Morrison, the president of the theater's board of directors. "Marcus, we need to talk about yesterday's auditions. If this is about William Hayes, I stand by my decision. He wasn't right for the role, and he was disrespectful to my artistic authority." "Marcus, do you know who William Hayes is?" "Some local retiree with delusions about his acting abilities." There was a long pause. "William Hayes is a 3-time Tony Award winner. He's performed on Broadway for 40 years. He's originated roles in major productions, worked with every major director in American theater, and is considered one of the finest character actors of his generation." Marcus felt the floor drop out from under him. "What?" He retired from Broadway 5 years ago and moved to Millbrook to be near his daughter and grandchildren. He's been living here quietly, not making a big deal about his background. He came to your audition because he loves theater and thought it might be nice to participate in local productions. But he didn't tell me. Why should he have to? Should actors be required to present their credentials before you treat them with basic respect? I didn't know who he was. That's the problem, Marcus. You dismissed one of the most accomplished actors in American theater because you decided he was just some delusional old man. You humiliated him publicly. You told him he was what's wrong with community theater, and you did all of this based purely on your own arrogance. Marcus sat down heavily. Janet, I apologize. If I'd known. If you'd known, you would have treated him differently. That's exactly the issue. He gave you one of the most nuanced auditions that stage has ever seen, and you dismissed it because it didn't match your vision. Multiple people who were there said his performance was extraordinary, but you were so invested in being the authority that you couldn't recognize genuine talent. What do? You apologize to him personally, and you seriously reconsider how you run these auditions. This isn't the first complaint we've received about your treatment of actors, Marcus, but humiliating a 3-time Tony winner might be the incident that finally forces the board to act. After the call, Marcus sat in the empty theater, the weight of his mistake crushing him. He'd spent 5 years building a reputation as a serious director, and he'd just destroyed it by insulting one of Broadway's legends. He looked up William Hayes's biography online. The more he read, the worse he felt. William Hayes, 3 Tony Awards, 7 Tony nominations, originated the role of James Tyrone in the 2003 revival of Long Day's Journey into Night, played Willie Loman on Broadway in 2012 to critical acclaim. The New York Times had called it the definitive interpretation of Arthur Miller's tragic Salesman. Worked with directors like Mike Nichols, Sam Mendes, and George C. Wolfe. Performed opposite Meryl Streep, Denzel Washington, Philip Seymour Hoffman. And Marcus had called him talentless. Marcus drafted an apology email, deleted it, drafted another. Nothing felt adequate. How do you apologize for that level of arrogance and disrespect? Finally, he drove to the address Janet had provided, a modest house on a quiet street where William Hayes lived with his wife. William answered the door, unsurprised to see Marcus standing there. Mr. Hayes, I owe you an enormous apology. You didn't know who I was, William said simply. That's not an excuse. Your audition was extraordinary. I should have recognized that regardless of your resume. Instead, I was so focused on maintaining my authority that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. You saw an older man who didn't fit your vision. And you dismissed him. I was wrong. About the casting, about the character, about everything. You were right. Willie's age is essential to the tragedy. I was changing it to seem innovative, but really I was just showing I didn't understand the play as well as I thought I did. William regarded him carefully. Why are you really here, Marcus? Because you're sorry, or because you found out I have Tony Awards? The question cut deep because it was fair. Honestly, both. I'm sorry for how I treated you, but I'm also terrified that I just humiliated myself in front of someone whose career I've admired for years, and that makes me question whether my apology is genuine remorse or just damage control. At least you're honest about that. For what it's worth, I've learned something. Not just about you, but about how I've been running these auditions. The board has received complaints before. I dismissed them because I thought I was maintaining professional standards. But really, I was just being an arrogant ass who couldn't handle anyone questioning my authority. William opened the door wider. Would you like to come in? Have some coffee? They sat in William's living room, surrounded by photos and memorabilia from a legendary career, playbills from Broadway shows, photos with famous actors, framed reviews. It was a museum of achievement that William had never mentioned. Why didn't you tell me who you were? Marcus asked. Because I wanted to be treated like everyone else. I came to audition because I love acting. I wasn't looking for special treatment or for people to defer to me because of my resume. I just wanted to participate in the community theater as a community member. But when I insulted your audition, it stung," William admitted. "Not because you rejected me. I've been rejected plenty of times in my career, but because you rejected the work without really seeing it. You were so convinced that your vision was right that you couldn't recognize a different interpretation might have value. Your interpretation was better. I see that now. It wasn't better or worse. It was different. The problem wasn't that you had a vision. Directors should have visions. The problem was that you couldn't handle anyone challenging that vision. You made it about authority rather than collaboration." They talked for over an hour, about theater, about community arts, about the difference between professional standards and professional arrogance. William shared stories from his Broadway career, including times he'd worked with directors who were brilliant but humble, and directors who were mediocre but tyrannical. "The best directors I worked with," William said, "were the ones who could recognize when actors brought something they hadn't imagined. They had visions, but they were open to collaboration. The worst directors I worked with were the ones who needed to be the smartest person in the room, who saw any suggestion as a threat to their authority." "I've been the worst kind," Marcus said quietly. "Not the worst. You're here, you're listening. That's more than some directors would do." Before Marcus left, William said something that would stick with him. Community theater shouldn't try to be Broadway. But it shouldn't be dismissive of excellence either. It should be a place where people of all skill levels can explore their love of theater together. Some will be beginners finding their voice. Some will be professionals sharing their experience. The magic happens when everyone's contribution is valued. The news of Marcus's confrontation with William Hayes spread throughout the local theater community. Within days, it reached regional theater circles. Within a week, it was a story being shared in Broadway community Facebook groups, a cautionary tale about arrogance and the danger of dismissing artists based on appearance or preconceptions. The Millbrook Community Theater Board held an emergency meeting. Several board members wanted Marcus fired immediately. Others argued for giving him a chance to make amends. Janet Morrison, as board president, made the decision. Marcus will continue as director of Death of a Salesman, but with conditions. He will issue a public apology. He will implement new audition protocols that treat all actors with respect. And he will invite William Hayes to serve as artistic consultant on this production, if William is willing. Marcus delivered his public apology at the next community theater meeting, attended by over 100 local theater enthusiasts. "I made a serious mistake," Marcus told the assembled group. "I humiliated a talented actor because I was more concerned with asserting my authority than recognizing excellence. William Hayes gave an extraordinary audition, and I dismissed it because it challenged my preconceptions about what the character should be. I let arrogance override artistic judgment. I'm deeply sorry to William, to everyone who witnessed that audition, and to this community that deserves better from its theater leadership. I'm committed to doing better, not just by apologizing, but by fundamentally changing how I approach directing and working with actors." The response was mixed. Some people appreciated the apology. Others felt it was too little too late. But the sincerity in Marcus's voice was evident, and most people were willing to see if his actions would match his words. The real question was whether William Hayes would agree to work with him. Marcus visited William again, this time with an official request from the board. "They want you to serve as artistic consultant on Death of a Salesman. I know I have no right to ask this after how I treated you, but I would be honored to work with you, to learn from you." William considered. "What role would I have?" "Whatever role you want. You could just advise on interpretation, or you could work directly with the actors, or—" Marcus took a breath. "You could play Willie Loman, if you're willing. Your audition was the best I've seen. The role should be yours. I'm not interested in taking roles from local actors who were counting on opportunities." "What about the person you were planning to cast?" "I hadn't cast anyone yet." I was still looking for someone who matched my vision, but my vision was wrong. Willie Loman should be what Arthur Miller wrote, a 63-year-old man facing the end of everything he believed in, and there's no one who could bring that to life better than you. William thought about it for several days. He talked with his wife, who encouraged him to follow his instincts. He reached out to a few old colleagues from Broadway, who reminded him that theater was about the work, not about holding grudges. Finally, he agreed. Not to play Willie Loman, he genuinely didn't want to take opportunities from local actors, but to serve as artistic consultant and to play the smaller role of Charlie, Willie's neighbor and friend. "Charlie's a good role," William said. "He's the moral center of the play, the successful man who understands what Willie never could. I can do something meaningful with it, and I can work with whoever plays Willie to help them understand the character." The production of Death of a Salesman became something special. Marcus, humbled by the experience, directed with a collaborative spirit he'd never shown before. He listened to William's insights about the play. He treated actors with respect. He created an environment where everyone felt valued. William worked with the actor cast as Willie, a local high school teacher named Robert who'd done community theater for years but had never landed a lead role. William spent hours with him, sharing insights from his own Broadway performance, helping him find the emotional truth of the character. During one rehearsal, Marcus watched William guide Robert through a scene and was struck by the generosity of the teaching. A Broadway legend giving his full attention and expertise to a community theater actor, no ego, no condescension, just genuine desire to help someone else succeed. That's what Marcus had been missing. Not professional standards, but professional generosity. Opening night of Death of a Salesman drew the largest audience Millbrook Community Theater had seen in years. Word had spread about William Hayes's involvement, and theater enthusiasts from surrounding towns came to see a Tony Award winner perform on a community stage. But the revelation of the evening was Robert's performance as Willie Loman. Guided by William's coaching and Marcus's newly collaborative direction, Robert delivered a heartbreaking portrayal of a man facing the collapse of his dreams. When William took the stage as Charlie, delivering the play's final speech, "Nobody das blame this man. A salesman has got to dream, boy." There wasn't a dry eye in the theater. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. After the show, Marcus stood in the theater lobby, watching William talk with audience members, sign playbills, take photos. He was gracious with everyone, treating local theater fans with the same respect he'd shown Broadway audiences. A reporter from the regional newspaper approached Marcus. "How did you convince a 3-time Tony winner to perform in community theater?" "I didn't convince him. I humiliated him, dismissed his talent, and treated him terribly. He came back anyway because he loves theater enough to look past my arrogance. This production succeeded despite me, not because of me." The reporter looked surprised by the honesty. "William Hayes taught me that real excellence isn't about maintaining authority or proving you're the smartest person in the room. It's about serving the work, valuing collaboration, and recognizing that great art can come from anywhere, community theaters, Broadway stages, or anywhere people gather to tell stories together." The article that ran in the newspaper framed the production not just as an artistic success, but as a story about humility, redemption, and what community theater could be when ego didn't get in the way. 6 months later, Marcus was offered a directing position at a regional professional theater, a step up from community theater, closer to the career he'd always wanted. He turned it down. "I used to think community theater was beneath me," he told Janet Morrison, "that it was a stepping stone to something better. But William Hayes showed me that choosing to work in community theater isn't settling. It's choosing to value community over prestige. I want to stay here. I want to build something that values everyone's contribution, from beginners to Broadway legends." William continued to perform in Millbrook Community Theater productions, never taking lead roles, always supporting younger or less experienced actors. His presence elevated every production, not because he was a star, but because he genuinely loved the collaborative process of creating theater. Years later, a documentary filmmaker making a film about community arts asked William why he chose to perform in small-town theater after retiring from Broadway. "Because theater isn't about where you perform, it's about why you perform," William said. "I did Broadway because I loved the craft, the challenge, the opportunity to tell important stories. I do community theater for the same reasons. The venue doesn't change the value of the work." What about the incident with Marcus Webb? He publicly humiliated you. He made a mistake born from insecurity and ego. We all make those mistakes. What matters is what you do after, whether you learn and grow or double down on arrogance. Marcus chose to learn. That takes more courage than most people realize. The story of the community theater director who humiliated a Tony Award winner became a cautionary tale in theater education programs. Drama schools used it to teach students about professional humility and the danger of ego overriding artistic judgment. But in Millbrook, it became something else, a reminder that excellence can appear anywhere, that community arts matter, and that treating everyone with respect isn't just good manners, it's the foundation of good theater. Marcus Webb never forgot the lesson. Every audition, every rehearsal, every production, he remembered the day he dismissed a legend because he couldn't see past his own arrogance. And he spent the rest of his career making sure that every actor who walked into his theater, amateur or professional, young or old, experienced or beginner, was treated with the dignity that William Hayes had shown was possible even in the face of humiliation. Because sometimes the person you dismiss as a delusional old man is one of the finest actors of his generation. And sometimes the greatest lesson you can learn is that authority means nothing without respect, and talent deserves recognition regardless of the venue where it appears. If this story resonated with you, remember, excellence doesn't announce itself with credentials. Community arts aren't lesser than professional arts. They're different expressions of the same love of creativity. And the amateur you dismiss today might have more expertise than you'll ever achieve. Share this with directors, teachers, artists, and anyone in positions of authority. Remind them that real leadership means recognizing talent wherever it appears and treating everyone with the respect they deserve. Subscribe to Real Justice. Stories for more tales of arrogance, humbled, excellence recognized, and the power of treating everyone with dignity regardless of their perceived status. Thank you for watching. Remember, the community theater actor you mock today might be a 3-time Tony Award winner, but that shouldn't matter. Treat everyone's artistic contribution with respect. Not because they might be famous, but because all artists deserve dignity.